What's up, everybody? Ron Placone here reporting for Status Coup. And first of all, shout out to everybody who is on the ground for the UAW strikes. Jordan, Tina, John, anybody else who's out there. Status Coup is bringing you very, very, very important updates on the UAW strike. And it is infinitely important. So I'm here to give you a brief about some other things that are going on in the world. And this concerns Julian Assange. Now, first and foremost, if you are not caught up on all of the components to the Julian Assange case, the case has been covered very extensively here on Status Coup. I've covered it on my own YouTube channel as well, which is youtube.com/Ron Placone. Please do take a deep dive and see everything that is going on with this case. The too long don't read summary is the case against Julian Assange is, first of all, not a case at all. To quote Jordan Dimmick, a journalist in the UK, calling this a kangaroo court would be an insult to kangaroos. What's going on with Julian Assange is a gross assault against freedom of the press. It's a gross assault against humanity, really. And Julian Assange should be freed immediately and home with his family. And when you look into the details of this whole case, it is beyond bogus. It rests upon the testimony of a con artist who admitted they lied about everything. It rests on a charge that they have absolutely no evidence of whatsoever. So, yeah, by all means, do a deep dive in other videos. We don't have time to kind of re-examine that whole thing now. Man, I'm sure a lot of you have already been paying attention to this for a while. But there's an update. So in Australia, which Julian Assange is an Australian citizen, about 5 years ago, there were one or two members of parliament. I know one of them was definitely a Green. I'm not sure if the other one was, but about two members of parliament who took a look around the Julian Assange case and said, this isn't right. This is messed up. This is wrong. This man needs to be free. And time passed. And as time went on, more and more members of parliament came around to their point of view. And now it's changed a bit. This is from Common Dreams. 64 Australian parliamentarians endorsed diplomatic trip to free Assange. So now there is a much larger contingent of the Australian parliament that wants to see Julian Assange free. So here's a little bit from the article. As a cross-party delegation of Australian politicians headed to Washington, D.C. on Tuesday to pressure the U.S. government to end its year-long pursuit of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, dozens of parliamentarians from down under expressed support for the diplomatic trip. So not only is it people in parliament who are making the trip that goes across party lines, there's other people in parliament not making the trip who are expressing their support for this trip. So here's a little bit from the letter signed by 64 Australian senators and members of parliament. We are resolutely of the view that the persecution and incarceration of the Australian citizen Julian Assange must end. Now, look, I'm not saying that members of the Australian parliament are perfect. They're definitely not. They're politicians still. And by the way, there are members in the Australian parliament that are trying to make Australia's healthcare system like ours in the United States. That's freaking evil. So it's not like, all of Australia politics is some left-wing utopia. It isn't. But the people there are reasonable enough as human beings that they heard the details of this issue. They saw the details of this case, and they came to the only reasonable conclusion that this is ridiculous and we need to free this man now. It's hard to even find the words for how ridiculous. I mean, living through this, it's mind-numbing in a sea of many other mind-numbing things. But this is among the mind-numbingness of it all. And in Australia, they were able to reasonably conclude that, okay, this guy needs to be freed. This is ridiculous. So now there's a bunch of them, and they are in the United States right now, as of the recording of this video, pleading with the Justice Department and others. I'd imagine they're meeting with Joe Biden as well, to free Julian Assange. Now, the big reason they had to make this trip is because they sent a letter, an open letter to the United States that's just pretty much been ignored. So here you have Australia, one of our biggest allies, by the way, in politics, one of the United States' biggest allies. Whenever we have a war, Australia is usually among the first to support our horrible cause, to support. We're basically like, we are the bully of the world. The United States is the bully of the world. And usually Australia is our most willing lackey. Just be like, hey, Australia, we're going to go pick on this today. All right. And then in return, we treat Australia like dirt. I mean, we're like the worst, worst fake bully friend to Australia. And so they send a letter and it just basically gets ignored. So they show up in person and they're there now. And here's something from Reuters that is so chilling. So Australian lawmakers call for release of Julian Assange during talks in Washington. A cross-party delegation of Australian lawmakers that traveled to the United States seeking the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange said they had a productive discussion in Washington with the U.S. Justice Department. The group of Australian lawmakers urged U.S. officials to drop their attempts to extradite Assange from the British prison to the United States, where he is wanted on charges over WikiLeaks release of confidential U.S. military records and diplomatic cables. Now, again, I know we don't have time to get into all the nuts and bolts of the case, but just a real quick, they have no evidence of these charges. Because here's the way freedom of the press works in law. First of all, Julian Assange is not an American citizen. And the way they're applying the laws to him, he gets treated like an American citizen when it is convenient for them, but not when it comes to rights he should have. So they're really having their cake and eating it too, first of all. But second of all, their big charge is that he allegedly helped Chelsea Manning hack things. Because here's the deal. In the United States, the way press freedom laws work is just publishing something is not a crime. Publishing something that maybe a journalist got, that a journalist got, is not a crime. Even going as far as to saying, hey, this is good information, I'd love to have some more of this, that's not a crime. If the journalist got it illegally, if they did some illegal hacking and the publisher helped them, okay, then that is by definition a crime. So that's what they're trying to pin on Julian Assange. They're trying to say he helped Chelsea Manning hack the documents that Chelsea Manning got. They have tortured Chelsea Manning to try to get a confession out of her that supports that, and she has not given it. You know why? Because it probably isn't true. I don't know about you, but if someone tortured me for 6 years to confess that somebody helped me hack something, if they actually did, I'd probably give in after 6 years of torture. So that's the basis of the charges and the basis of the situation. And of course, it rests on the confession of a person who was betraying Julian Assange from the get-go. This person was an informant for the FBI on Julian Assange since 2014. They laundered money from WikiLeaks. They laundered money elsewhere. They are a convicted sex offender. So they likely made a deal with the FBI years ago. They made this big, long testimony against Julian Assange. Later, it was revealed that they were lying about everything. And yeah, that's still their star witness, by the way. So Australian Senator Peter Whish-Wilson said that they had a fair hearing and a productive discussion. Here's hoping. And by the way, this includes lawmakers from the Labour government, the opposition Liberal and National parties. By the way, liberal means conservative in Australia. I mean, it also means that in the United States, but not as on the surface. But liberal literally means conservative when it comes to Australia. So Labour is their major, left party. Liberal is their major conservative. And then, of course, they have the Greens. And everybody was here. Again, You know, I'm not trying to view Australia's government through rose-colored glasses. They got their problems like everyone else. But when it comes to this issue, they were able to communicate and come together and realize, yeah, this is ridiculous. Here's a chilling end, isn't it? Check this out. Support for Assange among U.S. policymakers remains low. If extradited, Assange faces a sentence of up to 175 years in a maximum security prison. How barbaric is our government? Any reasonable person looking into the actual charges in this case, what's actually been done, the horrible things that have been done to this person, any reasonable person can conclude, hey, this is chilling. This is an assault on freedom of the press. This is a life lesson that something like this should never happen. This man should be freed immediately, sent home with his family. And then, you know what? The mission's not over, because after he's freed and home with his family, that is priority number one. But after that, we need to make sure we start building a world where nothing like this can ever happen again to anybody. Because it's horrible. Any reasonable person would come to that conclusion when you look at what's really going on in this case, but not politicians in the United States, apparently. They're going to ignore a letter from one of their biggest allies. And man, it is just so mind-numbing. You know, it's okay when you get things wrong to then correct the record otherwise. And again, shout out to the people of Australia. Shout out to the members of government in Australia who were able to go, hey, you know what? We had bad information about this issue, or maybe incomplete information about this issue, whatever it was. And now, as we're learning more, we realize that we had the wrong perspective. We were wrong. This man needs to be freed. And now we're calling for that. That's a good thing. When you get something wrong, either because you had bad information or just incomplete information, or because more information comes to the surface, it's perfectly healthy and natural and the right thing to do to evolve your positions and say, hey, I messed that one up. I'm correcting the record now. I've gotten stuff wrong before. I'll get stuff wrong in the future. I was wrong about Tulsi Gabbard. I was wrong about Lavajato initially. I was wrong about, more recently, here at Status Coup. I thought RFK was just going to be some hyper online trend for like 15 minutes and then he would just go away. And I didn't think it was worth giving any oxygen to the guy. I was wrong. Jordan and Tina were like, no, this is going to stay. They were right. I wish I wasn't wrong on that one. I bet they do too, but I was wrong on that one. It's totally fine to get stuff wrong. And then you say, hey, I had bad information or wrong information or incomplete information, or I made a wrong judgment call, and I'm correcting the record now. I'm retracting this. I'm fixing it. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody gets stuff wrong. Every single human being. And by the way, what I just described is the signs of a good leader. When you get something wrong and you correct the record, that's what a good leader does. And also what I just described, also for the record, that's the opposite of what most YouTubers do. Most YouTubers, when they get something, the way to be is when you get something wrong, you correct the record and you fix it and you say, hey, I got this wrong. I messed up. And when you get something right, you don't gloat about it. Most YouTubers, it's the total opposite. They never admit when they get something wrong. And when they get something right, you never hear the end of it. You never hear the end of it. So just to decide there. So we'll see what happens with these talks. I of course, am hoping for the best. And I'm hoping that Julian Assange is freed immediately. I've been hoping that for a very, very long time. And shout out to all the indie journalists who did not let this story die. It's the reason that this fight is still going on and has gotten to this point is because of independent journalists all across the world that refuse to let this story go away and refuse to let the truth be silenced on this one. So shout out to them for all of that and everybody who continues to cover this. And hopefully this is the beginning. And I will say that if our government completely ignores Australia, I mean, look, a letter should have been all it took. That open letter should have been enough for them to be like, okay. But they ignored it. So Australia had to show up. So let's see if our government ignores it again. And if it does, if they do, that is atrocious even for them. Even for the United States government, which I have, I think, one of the lowest opinions anyone can possibly have. But even for them, it would be utterly abysmal if they hear out Australia and they're still like, we're not going to do anything. John Fetterman's in a hoodie. Waka waka. Even for them, that would be incredibly, wow, you've got to be kidding me. So we'll see what happens. Here is hoping. And folks, I got a show coming up for everyone in the Los Angeles area, October 21st. I'm really excited about this. It's a theater show in my neighborhood of San Pedro. I am on that show. Stephanie Blum is on the show. She's been on Nickelodeon, HBO, MTV, and Amanda Cohen is on that show as well. Some of my favorite comics in all of LA. You can get tickets now at my website, ronplacone.com. That's October 21st at 8 p.m. in the San Pedro neighborhood of Los Angeles. See you there. And this is Ron Placone for Status Coup, signing out.